Hello everyone, this is Genius Yoshi, and today we're rating some Lorcana cards. Before we begin, let's go quickly over the rating scale. 5-star rating is an amazing card, a card I actually want to play, and I'm quite eager to get my hands on. Just drop on the board and it's going to have a huge impact, and I'm centering my strategy around such powerful cards. 4-star rating is about cards that are solid to play. I want to fill my deck with 4 and 5-star cards. There's no shame in playing a 4-star card, it's just a good card to play. 3 stars is a card that I will play if I really have to. I'm not overly happy about those, but they fill a specific role in my strategy, a specific hole in my curve. I just need to play these things because there are no better options out there. 2 stars are bad cards most of the time, and they're kind of the filler vanilla creatures, cards that there are just better options out there and can be easily replaced by a stronger card. And then there's the 1-star rating that I reserve for bad cards that I don't want in my deck. I explicitly will take them out and replace them with a 2-star card if I have to. I just don't like 1-star cards. And with that, let's start reviewing some cards. Let's open up a review of Sapphire cards with Ariel, Whoseit Collector. So Ariel is a 3/3/4/4, quest for 1. Cannot be inked, so she better be good in order to be played. And her ability is really cool. Look at this stuff. Whenever you play an item, you may ready this character. Normally, in most Lorcana cards, when you can ready a character, the character cannot quest anymore. But Ariel, Whoseit Collector, is an exception. She can quest multiple times in one turn, which can make her very powerful, assuming that there's a red support for it. Now she only quests for 1, so there's 2 ways you can make her very powerful. One is to increase the amount of lore that she gains by questing, and there are currently 2 cards that do it. I think there's an item and there's Merlin that will actually enable her to quest for more. So already questing for 2 sounds like pretty promising. And there's no limit to the amount of items you can play in a turn. So if you can play a ton of items, Ariel can quest a ton, which can be pretty cool. Now the items aren't super great so far, so Ariel's not that great with the current set of cards. She's very fun. She has the potential to become very good. If we end up with having item loops, where you can play an item and somehow get it back to your hand in a cycle, or in an infinite loop without having to pay ink, or even if it costs you 1 or 2 ink and you can start looping this, then Ariel can start questing obscene amounts really fast. But we can't do that right now. But in the future, something to keep in mind, Ariel's Whoseit Collector has a high ceiling, and because of that, I'm going to give her a 3-star rating because she's pretty cool, she's pretty fun, probably not going to be in the meta, but certainly playable if you want to have fun collecting Whoseits. Next in line we have Aurora Briar Rose, a 2/5/4 inkable and quest for 1. But when you play this character, chosen character gets -2 power this turn. Now this might look like a powerful ability that allows you to take one of your opponent's character that's exerted, and your opponent's like, ha, I've got lots of power. If you try to challenge me, you're going to lose some characters. And you go, no, I Aurora. Minus power. I get to trade with your character or to take it down and keep my characters alive, thanks to the power reduction. It sounds really good in a dream scenario. The problem is, that scenario doesn't happen very often. So you're getting slightly subpar stats for a 4-drop. Remember that you can get a card like Jafar that can suddenly become a 5/5 for 4 inkable and questing for 1. So Aurora is subpar for stats. The ability isn't as great as it looks. It does look decent. It is okay, but situational. And because of that, I'm going to give Aurora a 2-star rating. Let's take a look at the Mother Aurora, Dreaming Guardian, the 5-drop, a 3/5 quest for 2 with shift 3. So you can play her on top of a smaller Aurora, and we have a 2-drop Aurora, we have 4-drop Aurora, so the shift can come into play. The stats line is quite decent, 3-5 quest for 2. Quite fine. And her ability is Protective Embrace. Your other characters gain Ward, which means that your characters cannot be chosen except the Dreaming Guardian. And with a decent stat line, it's alright. And there's also the fact that double Aurora means that all your characters have Ward, so they can't be targeted by anything, and your opponent might be stuck with some Dragon's Fires in hands that they can't play. There is quite a bit of removal that's board wipes, and Aurora won't protect you from these, but it's still a nice plus on the card with already decent stats, inkable within that 4 to 6 range, which is where you want your inkable cards to be. So I think this card is going to see competitive play as a fine 5-drop to add to your deck until we get cards with more powerful effects in future sets. But for now, I'll give her a 4-star rating. Keeping on the theme of Auroras, we have the 2-drop Aurora Regal Princess. She's a 2/2 for 2 that quests for 2. Fairly simple, fairly straightforward. It's actually okay. I mean, questing for 2, there aren't that many 2-drops that do it. She's also a princess, so she's good for princess synergies, although I haven't been overly impressed with princesses so far. And you can shift the bigger Aurora on top of the Regal Princess. So a bunch of little upsides here and there. She might fit into some level of aggressive strategies, but overall I'm looking for an effect I'm looking for a good effect on my 2-drops. If I want to play them, she might get included in some decks just because there are no better options, but for now I'm going to give her a 3-star rating. It's time to change princess and take a look at Belle, Inventive Engineer. She's a 2/3 for 3 and quests for 2. So the 2/3 stats line is a little weaker in the 3-drop, as we are starting to get 3 powered characters at that point, and even 4 toughness if we go with the pure vanillas. So she falls off a little bit. She's still going to be able to withstand 2 powers of attack, which most 2-drops have, so she can perhaps use her ability once while questing, which is whenever this character quests, you pay 1 less for the next item you play this turn. And cost reductions can be very good, especially since Belle wants to quest with her 2 lore right off the start. So it's a nice ability, but there aren't very many good items, apart from Lantern, and Lantern is the ramp for your characters, so you don't necessarily want to ramp your characters to ramp your items to ramp your characters, although if the ink costs would line up nicely, I guess that could be good. But in this particular case, ramping a Lantern on turn 4 is not exactly where you want to be. So overall, it's a nice effect, decent stats line, but she tends to fall behind in terms of combat with other 3-drops, so I'm going to give her a 3-star rating. If we improve her wardrobe, we get Belle, strange but special, a 2/4/4/4 with 2 abilities, and she quests for 1, and she's legendary. So, inkable 4-drop, that's pretty good. 2/4 quest for 1, that's decent stats if she has a potable ability. So let's see what it is. Read a book. During your turn, you may put an additional card from your hand into your inkwell face down. That's a pretty good ability. It means that you get to ramp up much faster. If you get to use that ability for 2 turns, let's say, then that's kind of 2 ramp spells that you don't have to use. Now the downside is that you're losing cards from your hand. This isn't like Mickey Mouse Detective where you get it from free from your deck. But if you manage to play card draw spells, for example, part of your world, a whole new world, different world, then you can use Belle to dump the cards from your hand into your ink pool to then have almost no cards, play a whole new world, draw a fresh set of cards, and have the ink available to play all of these cards. And you've made use of all of those cards in your previous hand. So very good synergy with a whole new world. Even though she's not the appropriate princess for it, she will fit the role quite well. And now my favorite part. That's not necessarily my favorite part, just name the second part of her ability. While you have 10 or more cards in your inkwell, this character gets +4 lore. Now that's a lot of lore. So your 5-drop suddenly becomes a very, very potent threat in the late game, allowing you to quest for 5. Now this isn't going to happen that often, but Sapphire has a lot of ramp, and with that read a book, a whole new world type of combo, you can end up with a lot of cards into your ink pool, and occasionally that ability is going to kick in, and then Belle becomes very special and a superstar. Overall, I think this card is very playable, solid stats line, good first ability, situational, but pretty strong second ability, and I'm going to give this card a 4-star rating. Now we get to Chief Twee, Respected Leader, a 3/6 quest for 3 with support. Whenever he quests, you can add his combat power to another character. He's a 7 ink inkable character, and he's very meh. He doesn't do anything particular, his stats line is not overly impressive, and he costs 7, which is over the line. Overall, I don't really see why I would play Chief Twee, so I'm going to give him a 1-star. Next up, we have Donald Duck, strutting his stuff. He's a 4/3 for 5, quests for 2, and has ward, which means he can't be targeted by his spells. His stats line is fairly poor. The questing for 2 becomes relatively staple for a 5-drop. Now 5-drop inkables are pretty good, so he might find a slot if we run out of 4 to 6-drop inkable characters, but I think there's just a lot of better options in this range, and Donald Duck doesn't do anything overly good or impressive. He's going to quest once, for almost sure because of his ward, and even then we've seen some board wipes, which make him lose this awesomeness that wasn't overly awesome to begin with. So really, not great. Does have some uses, being a 5-drop inkable, getting this almost guaranteed questing, but I think he's going to sit in the box for the time being as a 2-star rated character. Next up, we have Flounder, Voice of Reason, a 2/2 for 1, quest for 1. In my previous review, we had Goons that does the same thing, and I rated Goons a 1-star. But, I mean, 2/2 for 1s are somewhat serviceable if you need a body on the ground that can act as a fire to cannon when you need it and quest for 1. So I'm going to give Flounder a 2 and kind of agree that they're 1.5s. I don't really want to play them, but I can see some people wanting to play them for pressure, but they shouldn't. There are some better options, and skipping the 1-drop is one of my preferred options. So I'm going to give this one a bone. Maybe a bone in the C. What would those be? I guess they're still bones. I'll throw this one a bone in the C and give it a 2-star rating. Ah, that's the granny card I was looking for. Gramma Tala, the Storyteller, a 1/1 for 2, quests for 1. It's about as weak stats as you can get for a 2-drop, but her ability, I will be with you. When this character is banished, you may put this card into your inkwell face down and exerted. And I think that ability is very good. Why? Well, you play Gramma Tala on turn 2. What do? You can take out an opponent's Maleficent for 1, or one of these pesky 1/1s that quest for 2. So she's an answer for that, and she returns back into ink. So you can trade her and not lose a card. Actually, it ramps up your strategy, which is very good. And if you're later in the game and you really need to ink her, you can just ink her. Or early in the game, you have 2 copies, you ink 1, you play 1, there you have your ramp. So she's very good in the early game. She does fall off a little bit later in the game, but she's almost guaranteed ramp. I mean, you can always just sacrifice her by challenging an opponent's exerted creature, and she's going to end up in your ink pool for next turn, which is pretty good. Being a 2-drop's pretty good because there's not that much good stuff to do on turn 2. I just like her, and her effect works both ways. If you want to just keep her as pressure and ink for and quest for 1 every turn, well, the opponent must answer that because she's eventually going to give you a bunch of lore for free. So your opponent's going to have to waste some time to challenge Gramma Tala to take her out. So I really like this card, and I'm going to give her a 4-star rating. He's not absolutely fantastic or groundbreaking, but she will be included in a lot of Sapphire decks. Next up, we have Hades Infernal Schemer, a 3/6 for 7 non-inkable, quest for 2. Now, I really like the 4/6 inkable. Anything higher than 6 starts to become expensive, so a 7-drop non-inkable we must be very critical about. His ability better be awesome. Well, first off, his stats line is fine. 3/6 is okay, questing for 2 is fine. Is there a downside to this? Well, you tell me, Infernal Schemer. When you play this character, you may put chosen opposing character into their player's inkwell face down. You get a let it go effect as an enter the battlefield. This is like the big dragon. This is like Maleficent the dragon. You get a removal enter the battlefield, but Hades costs 2 less ink. 7 is reachable, especially in Sapphire. That's the color of ramp. You can ramp into Hades, and then he has a huge impact when entering the battlefield. You get a big body, you get a serviceable quester, and you get to remove an opponent's threat, which is very good. Now, is there a downside to putting an opponent's threat into the ink pool? Of course there is, my dear 80s. But it's not that big of a downside considering you've just had a big tempo swing in your direction. Now, the one thing I will say about this card is that we want to be careful not to play too many Infernal Schemers in your deck, because if you're stuck with multiple copies in your hand, you can be stuck without inkable cards, stuck without anything to play, and stuck to lose the game. But as a 1 to 3 of, I think 2 is probably going to be the magic number, 2 of Hades Infernal Schemer, he will not go wrong, and he can be one of your best top ends in the Sapphire type ramp decks. So for that, I'm going to give him 4-star rating. He's going to see a lot of play in a lot of deck. If he was 6, I would give him 5-star, but there are some just slightly stronger cards out there. But he's up there for consideration as one of the best top-end threats in the format. The next card is Jasmine Disguised. Well, your disguised, Jasmine, is not fooling anyone. As a 3/3 for 3, questing for 2, you're still a vanilla creature. And for that, you will get the 2-star rating, usable in certain situations, and is a princess, but I would much rather be playing a stronger card or a card with a good effect. So, your disguise didn't work, and we'll review the next card. Next card is Jasmine without a disguise. Jasmine, Queen of Agrabah, a 2/5 for 5 inkable quest for 2. Already I'm intrigued. 4 to 6 inkable. I love these cards. Shift 3, so you can play her on top of weaker Jasmine. Weaker Jasmine we've just seen is not overly impressive, so we'll somewhat disregard the shift for now. And Caretaker. When you play this character and whenever she quests, you may remove up to 2 damage from each of your characters. Healing is bad. We mostly know this. But this is a lot of healing. Enter the battlefield healing and questing healing. So if you need healing, you can quest with Jasmine. Because it's kind of on demand when you have Jasmine in play, this effect's actually fairly decent. Also, it's healing for 2, which can be useful. So you can quest with Jasmine, healing one of your characters, enabling a challenge where your character is still going to live afterwards, or challenging with a character and then healing it afterwards with Jasmine without having to pay any more ink is a good healing effect. And because of this, and the fact that she's a 5-drop inkable with solid stats, I like this card. I'm actually going to give it a 4-star rating. And I think she deserves an inclusion as the 5-drop of choice that's going to end up in the ink pool most of the time for most of the Sapphire decks out there. We then look at Maleficent, Sinister Visitor, a 3/4 for 4, quests for 2, vanilla creature. Vanilla creature, did I say? And that's the 2-star bin for you. Let's upgrade our Maleficent to Maleficent Uninvited, a 3/6 for 5, questing for 3. With no ability. Now, I typically don't like vanilla cards, and I don't overly like Maleficent Uninvited, but she is a 5-drop inkable, which is pretty good. You're going to ink her most of the time, but as a late game top deck, 3/6 questing for 3 is actually pretty solid. That 6th point of toughness makes her survive the assault of a lot of other 5-drops, which means that she can most likely get her 3 lore at once or twice, maybe? Well, the once is almost guaranteed unless your opponent has a point removal spell, which would have costed the same as Maleficent, so she's done her job. But surviving 2 combats means she's done 3 damage twice. She's going to quest once or twice with that 3 lore. She does a lot of work for that stats line on 5. So because of that, I think I'm going to give her at least 3. I think she's going to see a bit more play, but I'm going to settle for a 3-star rating because there's no half stars. So 3-star rating. She will do some work, but she's unimpressive. I would rather have a good effect as a 5-drop, but not too much shame playing Maleficent Uninvited. Next up, we have Maurice, the world-famous Inventor, as a 2/7 quest for 2, but that's not why we're playing it. We're playing it because it works. Whenever you play an item, you may draw a card. So all these small items you can play in Flurry with Maurice on battlefield and replace these cards and get all the value out of those items. Also, whenever he quests, you can pay 2 less for the next item you play this turn. Cost reduction, very good. Card draw, very good. 2/7 stats line, not so great. Also, the cost of 6 is a little prohibitive. But as we get more item synergy cards in the future, Maurice is going to be one of those ink early, play late game, or once you're even at 4 or 5 inks, you might even conserve your Maurice to play it, then play a flurry of items, cash out for a bunch of cards, and revel in the awesomeness of your powerful items once we get powerful items. For now, it's probably a 3-star with the cards we have, but for the card itself, in Void, I'm going to give 4-star rating for its future potential with other sets. I'm also quite interested in seeing what item slingers can do. I don't have too high hopes competitively for the deck, but as a fun deck, it's going to be pretty fun. Next up, we have Merlin, self-appointed mentor, a 3/4 for 4, quest for 1, inkable. So he's in that 4/6 drop, 4/6. I like that. His ability support, whenever he quests, he may add his power to another character this turn. Between that and just a vanilla 3/4, I don't think there's that much of an upside. I mean, you're going to be pumping out your 1-drop with a bunch of power to get that hit in. That seems unlikely. Cards typically trade together fairly well, and I'd rather just have more stats on Merlin himself or get Merlin to have rush or something like that. I don't value support as being particularly good, so I think Merlin is about a vanilla character in that ink spot, so I'm going to give him a 2-star rating. Next up is Mickey Mouse Detective, a non-inkable 3-drop, a 1/3, quest for 1. Stats line poor, non-inkable poor, questing poor. Get a clue, Mickey Mouse, and that's his ability. When you play this character, and you put the top card of your deck into your inkwell face down and exerted. And that is a money effect. That is a fantastic effect. It allows you to get a card in your ink pool for free, so it's essentially a draw card and put it in your ink pool. So you're getting card advantage with Mickey Mouse Detective. You're getting ramp with Mickey Mouse Detective. Essentially, you're putting an extra card in your ink pool that you wouldn't be allowed for the turn. And you're getting a body on the battlefield that can quest and force the opponent to challenge it. It can pick off pesky 1 toughness characters. Mickey Mouse Detective is a fantastic card because of that ability, and it's just super solid, and 3 is really cheap, so I have to give this card a 5-star rating. It's fantastic, and playing Sapphire for the ramp Mickey Mouse is going to make the cut 99% of the time. Next up we have Mufasa, King of the Pride Lands. And it looks like his pride has gotten to him because he just looks like a weaker version of a Maleficent that we've reviewed. Maleficent was 3/6, quest 3 for 5. He's 4/6, quest 3 for 6, costing 1 more ink for that 1 power, and he just loses at least 1 star, if not 2 for it. I'm going to lose 1 star for it and rank him as a 2-star rated character. Still okay, but there's an upgrade, and I don't like the upgrade that much. Next up, we have Philoctetes, Trainer of Heroes. I have no idea how to pronounce his name, but I'm going to pronounce it with enough conviction that you will believe that this is how it is pronounced, and I know what I'm talking about. So, this character is a 2-drop, a 3/1, quest for 1 with support. The 3 power is interesting. The 1 willpower is a liability. That means that he gets pinged to death by Tinkerbell, he gets pinged to death by Hans, and 1 is just a problem. I'd rather have Prince Eric as a 1/3 that can suddenly become a 3/3 instead on the offense, because Philoctetes is really all about taking out a character, acting like a 2-drop smash. But the 1 willpower is a big liability, and because of that, I'm going to give him a 2-star rating. We then come to Robin Hood, the Unrivaled Archer, a 4/4 for 6, quests for 2. 2 abilities. Feed the Poor. When you play this character, if an opponent has more cards than you do, you draw an extra card. And Good Shot. During your turn, this character gains Evasive. So he can challenge character with evasives, and if you have fewer cards than your opponent, you draw a card. 6-drop is starting to be relatively expensive. The Feed the Poor is flip a coin, really. So when is your opponent going to have more cards than you in their hand? If you're playing an aggressive deck and you're playing a lot of cards on board and have a thin hand, well, if that's the case, you're likely to be playing a 6-drop, and likely be playing a 6-drop, really. So that's not going to work out. So you're really hoping to play the Unrivaled Archer in a mid-range mirror match where your opponent is a bit more greedy, which is the type of match that you don't really want to be playing, because that means the opponent's going to be advantaged over you. So Feed the Poor isn't going to trigger that often, which from my experience it doesn't really. Also, you're always playing it the turn after your opponent. There's just so many things that can happen, and I find that Feed the Poor doesn't trigger very often. The ability to challenge evasive is not that great. It's less than half as good as evasive, and his stats line is not that great. For a 6-drop, 4/4s is a little disappointing. So because of that, I think he's about the value of a 2-star. Which is a shame. I really like Robin Hood, and he's super rare, but he just doesn't pull his weight here. Next we have Scar, Mastermind, a 5/4 for 6 with questing 2, Insidious Plot. When you play this character, chosen opponent character gets -5 power until end of turn. Now we have cheaper cards with this ability. We have an Aurora that has this ability. We have Maximus on 3, and it's kind of a weaker version of the ability, but it's hard to land, and it's hard to land effectively. Having this on the 6-drop makes it even harder to land, because you're later in the game, you need the opponent to be questing or challenging with a character where you have a good swing back, but to avoid the trade, you're going to be playing Scar Mastermind just at that very specific time. I would rather have an effect that's good all the time than an effect that's only good rarely. And because of that, I don't like Scar Mastermind that much. His stats line's fine. 5/4, quest for 2 for 6. Maybe it could be a little better. On the 6-drop slot, I'm expecting a better effect. Or even for 5, you can have Cerberus as a 5/6. So his stats aren't that impressive, especially when he's combat driven. So I don't like this card very much. I'm going to give it a 2-star rating. Next, we have a big crab, Tamatoa, so shiny, a 5/8 for 8. Quest for 1. Now an 8-drop better be super impressive in order to see some play. So what do we have here? What have we here? Really his ability. When you play this character and whenever he quests, you may return an item card from your discard pile into your hand. Alright, so there's card advantage there, which is good. And this character gets +1 lore for each item you have in play, which can be pretty devastating stats. So an 8-drop that generates at least 1 card, so you get 1 item back, can quest for potentially obscene amounts, has pretty solid stats line, and is going to return you more item cards when he quests, is pretty cool. It's hard to reach that 8 ink, but he is in Sapphire, the color of ramp, so there might be some hope there. Overall, I don't think it's a competitive card. I think it's a very, very fun card to play in the items deck, and because of that, I'm going to give it a 3-star rating. Pretty cool, just a tad too expensive. We then see Triton, the Sea King, a 5/9 for 7, quest for 2. So it's a vanilla creature that's super expensive. His stats are great, but with no ability to speak of and being outside the 4 to 6 range, 7's just a tad too expensive, even in the ramp color of Sapphire. So I think there are just better options out there, and I'm going to give Triton a 2-star rating. Next we have Develop Your Brain. Look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put 1 to your hand and the other on the bottom of your deck. It costs 1, it's inkable. If you don't have 1 drop in hand, or if you just have 1 extra ink, you play Develop Your Brain, find the card you need, or at least improve your hand a bit. Pretty solid. You have the cards you need early game, just ink it. It's not a problem. You draw it late game, find the thread that you need for this moment or for next turn. Awesome. Overall, these type of cantrip cards are extremely powerful, quite useful, and will live for a long time as part as decks playing that ink type. So I'm going to give it a 4-star rating. It's not flashy. You can make an argument that it's 5-star because it's going to be played forever, but I'm going to keep it at 4 because it's not a flashy card. It's not going to win you the game. It's just going to improve your consistency. You definitely want to play it. It's going to be part of every Sapphire deck, but it's not going to win the game for you. Next up, we have If It's Not Baroque, Then Don't Fix It. Well, this card is broken in the bad way. It costs 3, and its effect is return an item card from your discard pile to your hand. Now, items are not spectacular so far. Actually, they're kind of meh, if not bad. I'm trying to dance around the fact that items aren't great. And now you're about to pay 3 to pick one up from your discard pile, which is quite situational. This is non-inkable. This is terrible. This is a classic 1-star rated card. You do not want to be anywhere near this card unless it gets fixed, but if it's not Baroque. We then look at Let It Go, one of the most iconic Disney songs of the last decade. Let's see if the card lives up to the standard. So it's a 5 ink card, which can be inked. That's a good start. And it can be sung by a character with 5 or more ink cost. Alright, that's a plus side. It allows you to put target character into the player's inkwell face down and exerted. So you ramp up your opponent, but in exchange you get single target removal. Now this competes with Dragonfire, but I like Let It Go much better because it's inkable, first of all, and it can be sung, so you don't lose any tempo playing this card. So on 5, you can play your 5-drop, on 6, you Let It Go and still play your 6-drop, gaining a humongous swing in tempo. You remove an opponent's threat for essentially free, while it's costing you 1 card, so it's a 1-for-1. You do give your opponent 1 ink, which is a drawback, but I think the drawback is well worth playing Let It Go. So overall, I really like this card. The downside brings it down a notch for me, but I think this is going to be the single target removal by excellence in the 5-drop spot, and so I'm going to give it a 4-star rating. We then have One Jump Ahead, a 2-ink song that's non-inkable that simply ramps up your ink. So you take one card from the top of your deck and put it face down your inkwell. So this is the same effect that Mickey and Gramma Tala have, except that One Jump Ahead is a 2-costed song. If this was inkable, it'd be great, but because it's not inkable, it becomes a little iffy in the mid-game. You get stuck with paying 2 in order to put a card into your inkwell, while you'd just rather put the One Jump Ahead into your inkwell, but you can't do that, which puts it in a bit of an awkward spot. You really want to be able to have a 2-drop that can sing One Jump Ahead. For example, if you can get a Gramma Tala to start singing One Jump Ahead, then we're talking business. Also, it competes with Mickey and Gramma Tala, which I think are both superior cards. So I think One Jump Ahead is going to see some play because it allows you 4 additional ramp, and ramp is pretty good, especially just the no turn 1 into One Jump Ahead into 4-drop is a perfectly decent line, and we can see Lantern do a similar thing, except that Lantern is an item so you can use the ink on the same turn. One Jump Ahead is a little bit weaker, so I'm going to give it a 3-star rating, but I do think we're going to be seeing it in a handful of decks. We then look at Work Together. Now, working together in general is always profitable. Teamwork solves problems. This card is pretty awful. So it's one of these 1-ink inkable action that gives you a very small effect for this turn. It's not worth the card that you're sacrificing to get that effect. So in this case, you must have 2 characters for this to work, because these characters are working together. You need one of these characters to quest, and then it's going to give its combat power to another character, so that that character can then deal damage. I mean, if you just want to deal damage that bad for 1 ink, play Fire the Cannons, which is just much better in Void. It can deal with, actually just much better in so many ways. I can't start to explain why. So Work Together is horrible, and I'm going to give it a 1-star rating. Coconut Basket. Alright, now we're getting interesting. So this is a 2-ink item. It's inkable, which is a good start. And it gives you the permanent effect that whenever you play a character, you may remove up to 2 damage from chosen character. So this gives you healing throughout the game. Healing in general is bad, because you need to have a damaged character that's not banished, and you need the healing to actually be impactful on the next combat. And for these criteria to be met, it's typically not worth playing these healing cards, because these situations are quite rare. You're sacrificing a card into the Coconut Basket to put it into play. You're sacrificing the turn to put the 2 ink into play. Maybe you'd be just better off ramping with One Jump Ahead. So I can see some potential in this card because it allows you to heal continuously, and you can gain value if you get to activate that effect throughout the game. But we have much better options in terms of healing with Jasmine, Queen of Agrabah. So Coconut Basket really just fills that item synergy with marginal benefits. So I think we need better items than Coconut Basket into the Item Slingers deck, but it might take the slot for now. So I'm going to give it a 2-star rating. It's a pretty bad card in the Void with some use in an Items Tribal deck. Next we have Eye of the Fates. So this is a 4-drop item that allows you to once per turn give a chosen character +1 lore, and you can activate it the turn you play it. This is interesting. Now the main synergy with Eye of the Fates is with the Ariel that unexerts herself whenever you cast an item, and this is an item. So you can exert Ariel, play Eye of the Fates, unexert Ariel, then use your Eyes of the Fate to give more lore to Ariel, quest again, gaining 3 lore, And then as you're playing this in item deck, you can play more. And then if Ariel's already questing for 2, thanks to Eye of the Fates, you get to quest multiple times. Cool combo potential. In a normal curve, well, spending your 4-drop on an item is a difficult pill to swallow because you can add more pressure to the board, add more control. But Eye of the Fates does allow you to put in more lore into that evasive character that you have. So you can maintain board presence with your big bully characters, and then you have your little evasive just pack a little bit more punch. And if that evasive gets removed, you can put another one and just keep on using Eye of the Fates. So you can pay a lot less for your evasive and still get the value out of that extra lore. Overall, I think this is going to end up into combo style decks where you get to unexert a character multiple times, mostly with Ariel. I think it's a lot of fun in there. Probably not competitive, but a lot of fun. So I'm going to give this card a 3-star rating. Next up, we have an item that ramps in Fishbone Quill. So it's a 3-ink inkable item that allows you to exert it once a turn, put any card from your hand into your inkwell face down. Now, there's 2 interesting things to the card that you can put. First of all, it's not exerted, so you can use the ink that you're putting into your inkwell in the same turn, and that's not to be neglected. The second one is you put it face down, meaning that you can put a non-inkable card into your inkwell using Fishbone Quill, which is quite interesting. So these cards that can become dead cards, say like 1 jump ahead, you can just sneak into your ink pool and use in the same turn. Now, Fishbone Quill is quite costly. As Ursula tells you in the text there, if you want to cross the bridge, you got to pay the toll. Well, you got to play the Fishbone Quill, and then you're going to have to exert it to put an extra card into your ink pool. So it's costing you at least the Fishbone Quill just to have access to that ability. And that's a card. And then if you're putting more cards into your ink pool, then we're talking at least ink number 5, maybe ink number 6 or 7. If you want to get more value out of it, then you're activating it multiple times. And then your hand becomes empty really, really fast. Now, Fishbone Quill, I see some uses if you're playing I dump my hand into my ink pool to ramp really, really fast and really far. And then I play a card that allows me to draw a ton of cards, say a whole new world. So that would be a perfect use case of Fishbone Quill. Now, you don't want to be stuck with too many Fishbone Quills, but then again, you can use Fishbone Quill to throw away a Fishbone Quill. You can use some of the item synergies, like if you're playing a Fishbone Quill with the Belle's father in play, Maurice, then you get to draw a card to replace it. But then if you're playing Fishbone Quill after turn 6, why are you playing it then? So overall, it's a little awkward. It's quite costly to play it, but the ramp is real here. It allows you to put a lot of cards into your ink pool. I think there are better ramping options. I much prefer Mickey that just puts the body in play. So I'm going to give Fishbone Quill a 3-star rating. Some use cases for items, some value, but there are better options out there. Next up, we have a magic golden flower, just blooming with the light of the foilness. It's a 1-drop item, it's inkable, and it has a terrible ability that you can 1-time sacrifice the magic flower to heal 3 damage from a chosen character. So it's a 1-time healing effect. Yeah. Now, what Magic Golden Flower has going for it is that it's a 1-drop item, and it's inkable. So if you're playing it with Maurice or Tamatoa, then it really, you just trade the Magic Golden Flower to draw a card. It's a very easy trigger, I'm playing an item, which is good with good item support. I'd prefer if there was some use to the Magic Golden Flower, something a little better. Reduce your opponent's lore by 1 or something meaningful, but you can use the Magic Golden Flower as just a 1-drop item that you're inking most of the time. It's pretty bad. The item support's not there. You really draw the card with Maurice, increase the questing from Tamatoa, but is that really worth the card? I don't think so. So I'm going to give this card a 2-star rating for a cheap item synergy and nothing else. Staff of Varendell, a 1-drop inkable item. Let's see if its item is better than Flower just like that. So command, you can exert it to give support to a character this turn. It's a pretty bad effect. I mean, it's the effect that we've seen on Work Together, except that now you can use it once per turn for the same cost, and you get item synergies, which really shows you just how bad Work Together is. So Scepter of Arendelle has the terrible effect, although marginally better than Heal 3 and Get Banished, I must say. So I guess it's slightly better than Flower we just reviewed, for the same reason as a 1-drop, I trigger playing an item cheaply. It's alright. Maybe with the Scepter and the Flower, you actually get to just spam trigger a Maurice. And that's cool, and then you play a Tamatoa and quest for obscene amounts. Seems fun, doesn't seem overly playable. I'd rather have items that do something. So I'm going to also give Scepter of Arendelle a 2-star rating, mentioning that I think it's better than the card we just reviewed. I hope that you've enjoyed my review of all the Sapphire cards in Lorcana the First Chapter. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the item cards that are available and the item synergies in the Sapphire ink. Also, let me know whether you've enjoyed this review and this type of review, and if you want to see the review that's left for the remaining 4 inks. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.